So we're doing Neverending Storytelling.
I don't think it's.
We don't know.
I think it hasn't started yet.
Hello, welcome to Neverending Storytelling. How are you doing today? We should cancel this one.
No, just go ahead.
Today we are going to be doing, so first I'm going to give you what we're doing today, and that's what I'm doing right now. So first we're going to read the Bible with my dad. This is my dad. Say hi.
Hi.
And second, Kim's going to send out the link. And then when the Bible is done, Daniel is right here. Say hi, Daniel.
I'm going to do a one-part joke today. Okay?
Okay. He's going to do one part of a joke, and then after Kim's synopsis, he's going to do the other half.
No, there's only one part to it.
Okay, so he can do one part. Perfect.
Who cares?
And I still need to get that last sound, so we can do that. Okay, and then I'm gonna read
And then
Neverending
he's gonna
Story.
read Neverending Story.
I haven't decided how many chapters I'm going to read. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a little creepy. I haven't decided how many chapters I'm going to read today. I do have to work tonight at 12. So, Dad man. Yeah, okay. So, I do have to read tonight at 12, so that might make us a little bit on the, ready to call it quits early. Today is the 10th of July. Copy, I'm going to, first comment on this video is going to be, I don't know if anybody's following along. I use Bible Hub when I read the Bible. When I don't have a Bible with me, I use Bible Hub. So I'm not endorsing them. I'm just telling you what I use. So this is going to be a lot of fun because there's a lot of names in this chapter. If you've never read chapter 10 before, you should follow along and see how much fun I get to have while I read all these names in Genesis chapter 10. This is the English Standard Version of the Bible, but it doesn't matter. It might as well be Hebrew for all extents and purposes. All right. Genesis chapter 10. These are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tyrus. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these the coastland people spread in their lands, each with his own language, by their clans in their nations. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Sabtika. The sons of Ramah, Sheba and Dedan. Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land he went into Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Ir, Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city. Egypt fathered Ludim and Anamim, Lahabim, Naphtuhim, Pathrasim, Caluhim, from whom the Philistines came, and Caphtorim. Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, the Archites, the Sinites, the Arvadites, the Zemarites, and the Hamathites. Afterward, the clans of the Canaanites dispersed, and the territory of the Canaanites extended from Sidon in the direction of Gerar as far as Gaza, and in the direction, or Gaza, and in the direction of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim, as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. To Shem also, the father of the children of Eber, the elder brother of Japheth, children were born, the sons of Shem, Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, Aram, the sons of Aram, Uz, Hul, Gether, and Math. Arphaxad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Aber. To Aber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Joktan fathered Almadad, Shelah, Hazarmaveth, Jerah, Hadaram, Uzal, Dikla, Obal, Abimiel, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. The territory in which they lived extended from Misha in the direction of Sephar to the hill country of the east. These are the sons of Shem by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations. These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies in their nations, and from these nations spread abroad in the earth after the flood. Please put in the comments which of these people that you wish the Bible gave more information about. What? Jobab? You mean Jobab? That's not putting in the comments. Nobody ever puts in the comments what I ask to. All right. So at this time, Daniel has a joke. So here he is. Welcome, Daniel.
I do not like my job as an origami teacher. It's too much paperwork. It's too much paperwork.
Oh, he doesn't like his job as an origami teacher because it's too much paperwork. I get it now. It's great. Okay. All right. So at this time, I hope that everybody enjoyed listening to me try to pronounce all those names. Maybe after I have my Hebrew classes, I'll be more adept at being able to pronounce some of those words. But for now, that's what you get, including Jobab, who was the son of Joktan. So here is Kimberly, and she is going to give the synopsis. Kimmy.
So what happened in the last chapter was Bastian, he went over through the maze of doors and he decided he wanted to see Atreyu. So he goes through the doors, thinking about which doors looked a lot like he saw this one that looked like it looked like the grass on the field, and there was this other one that was purple, like the purple buffaloes. So he went through the grassy one because he lived in the fields and everything. But he then found these people who were going to this tournament, and Atreyu just so happened to be at the tournament. So he decided to tag along. They went over to this place, and it was like a city in a lake, except the lake, it was basically had a ton of salt in it.
What are they doing in this?
Basically, it was more of a circus.
What was the prize?
Well, the person who won would go with Atreyu to find the savior to Fantastica and then be his bodyguard. So then the guy who won, Bastian, he was like, "Hey, I'll challenge you," blah blah blah. And then the guy was like challenging him. He challenged him to like throwing a deck of cards in the air and hitting it with his sword or something. Oh wait, yeah, it was an arrow. Right. And so then he was like, "Hey, you've chosen the challenges so far, so I'm going to choose one now. Why don't we swim across the salty lake and they had like special
The
boats.
salty lake?
Yeah, they had special boats.
It was the silver lake, right?
They had special boats designed so that they would not melt in the lake. It was that bad.
They turned it into silver. Did I read it wrong?
You read it wrong, or you imagined it wrong.
Oh, okay.
Everything that touches the water gets disintegrated, basically.
Okay.
So he challenged this guy to swim across the lake, and he was like, "What?
That's
Why?
not courage. That's suicide.
Yeah.
The swamps of sadness.
No, he didn't. He did not." So then what happened was, the guy was like, "Nope, I backed down." And then Bastion was like, "Hey, you're too scared to try this, so that's why you don't want to do it." And then he was like, "So what have you done?" And then he was like, "Hey, I went over to the many-colored death, saw him, talked to him, swam in this weird stuff that was obviously like pretty cool or something. I don't really remember what it was called, but he was like, and also I got this pretty cool sword from him." And then he was like, "What?" And then Atreyu was like, "Hey, look, it's the Savior to Fantastica." And he doesn't need a bodyguard because apparently he's done all these cool things, and he can defend himself better than all of Fantastica could. And that's basically where we are, right?
Yeah, well, Atreyu determined, I'm sorry, I missed part of that, but Atreyu determined that that Bastian was the savior, even though he didn't recognize him. He noticed it in his eyes, and blah, 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 blah. Something like that. Okay, so this is chapter 17. Chapter 17, A Dragon for Hero Henrik. And Hero Henrik was the champion before Bastian challenged him. He was the champion in yesterday's story. And the first letter is Q because Michael End had to name a character something that started with a Q so that he could start a chapter with a Q. Because if you haven't noticed, each chapter is starting with a different letter of the alphabet. So, all right. So this is chapter 17, A Dragon for Hero Henrik. Quercabod, the Silver Sage, had slumped down in his chair asleep, for already the hour was late. Consequently, he missed an experience more beautiful and more extraordinary than any he had known in the 107 years of his life, and so did many others in Amarganth, citizens as well as visitors, who, exhausted by the festivities, had gone to bed. Only a few were still awake, and those few were uniquely privileged. Falkor, the white luck dragon, was singing. High in the night sky he flew in circles over the lake of tears and let his bell-like voice ring out in a song without words, a simple, grandiose song of pure joy. The hearts of all those who heard it opened wide. And so it was with Bastian and Atreyu, who were sitting side by side on the broad balcony of Quercabod's palace. Neither had ever heard the song of a luck dragon before. Hand in hand they listened in silent delight. Each knew that the other shared his feelings, a feeling of joy at having found a friend, and they took care not to spoil it with idle words. The great hour passed. Falkor's song grew faint and gradually died away. When all was still, Quercabod woke up and excused himself. "I'm afraid," he said, "that old men like me need their sleep. I'm sure you youngsters will forgive me. I must really be off to bed." They wished him a good night, and Quercabod left them. Again the two friends sat for a long while in silence, looking up at the night sky, where the luck dragon was still flying in great slow circles. From time to time he passed across the full moon like a drifting cloud. "Doesn't Falkor ever sleep?" Bastian asked finally. He's asleep now, Atreyu replied. In the air? Oh, yes. He doesn't like to stay in houses, even when they're as big as Quercobod's palace. He feels cramped. He's just too big, and he's afraid of knocking things over, so he usually sleeps way up in the air. Do you think he'd let me ride him sometime? Of course he would, said Atreyu, though it's not so easy. You've got to get used to it. I've already ridden Grogramon, said Bastian. Atreyu nodded and looked at him with admiration. So you said during your contest with Hero Henrik. How did you tame the many-colored death? I have Auron, said Bastian. Oh, said Atreyu. He seemed surprised, but he said nothing more. Bastian took the childlike Empress's emblem from under his shirt and showed it to Atreyu. Atreyu looked at it for a while, then he muttered, So now you are wearing the gem. Thinking he detected a note of displeasure, Bastian hastened to ask, Would you like to have it back? He started undoing the chain. No. Atreyu's voice sounded almost harsh, and Bastian wondered what was wrong. Atreyu smiled apologetically and repeated gently, No, Bastian, I haven't worn it in a long while. As you like, said Bastian. Then he turned the amulet over. Look, he said, have you seen the inscription? Yes, said Atreyu, I've seen it, but I don't know what it says. How come? Greenskins can read tracks in the forest, but not letters. This time it was Bastian who said, Oh, what does it say? Atreyu asked. Do what you wish, Bastian read. Atreyu stared at the amulet. So that's what it says. His face revealed nothing, and Bastian couldn't guess what he was thinking. If you had known, he asked, would it have changed anything for you? No, said Atreyu. I did what I wanted to do. That's true, said Bastian and nodded. Again, they were both silent for a time. There's nothing I have to ask you, said Bastian finally. You said I looked different from when you saw me in the magic mirror gate. There is something I have to ask you. Sorry. You said I looked different from when you saw me in the magic mirror gate. Yes, entirely different. In what way? You were fat and pale, and you were wearing different clothes. Bastian smiled. Fat and pale, he asked incredulously. Are you sure it was me? Wasn't it? Bastian thought it over. You saw me, I know that, but I've always been the way I am now. Really and truly? I should know, shouldn't I? Bastian cried. Yes, said Atreyu, looking at him thoughtfully. You should know. Maybe it was a deforming mirror. Atreyu shook his head. I don't think so. Then how do you explain your seeing me that way? I don't know, Atreyu admitted. I only know that I wasn't mistaken. After that, they were silent for a long while, and at length they went to sleep. As Bastian lay in his bed, the head and foot of which were made of finest silver filigree, his conversation with Atreyu ran through his head. Somehow it seemed to him that Atreyu was less impressed by his victory over Hero Henrik, and even by his stay with Grogramon, since he heard that he, Bastian, was wearing the gem. And, true enough, he thought, maybe his feats didn't amount to much, considering that he had the amulet to protect him, but he wanted to win Atreyu's wholehearted admiration. He thought and thought. There had to be something that no one in Fantastica could do, even with the amulet, something of which only he, Bastian, was capable. At last it came to him, making up stories. Time and again he had heard it said that no one in Fantastica could create anything new. Even the voice of Yulala had said something of the kind, and just that was his special gift. He would show Atreyu that he, Bastian, was a great storyteller. He resolved to prove himself to his friend at the first opportunity, maybe the very next day. For instance, there might be a storytelling contest, and he would put all others in the shade with his inventions. Or better still, suppose all the stories he told should come true. Hadn't Grogramon said that Fantastica was the land of stories, and that even something long past could be born again if it occurred in a story? Atreyu would be amazed, and while picturing Atreyu's amazement, Bastian fell asleep. The next morning, as they were enjoying a copious breakfast in the banquet hall of the palace, Silver Sage Quercabod said, "We have decided to hold a very special sort of festival for the benefit of our guest, the savior of Fantastica, and his friend who brought him to us. Perhaps, Bastian Balthazar Bucks, it is known to you that in keeping with an age-old tradition, we Amarganthians have always been the ballad singers and storytellers of Fantastica. From an early age, our children are instructed in these skills. When they grow to adulthood, they journey from country to country for several years, practicing their art for the benefit of all. Everywhere they are welcomed with joy and respect, but we have one regret. Quite frankly, our stock of stories is small, and many of us must share this little. But word has gone round, whether true or not, I don't know, that you in your world are famous for your stories. Is that the truth?" "Yes," said Bastian. "They even made fun of me for it." Silver Sage Quercabod raised his eyebrows in disbelief. "Made fun of you for telling stories that no one had ever heard? How is that possible? None of us can make up new stories, and we, my fellow citizens, and I would all be infinitely grateful if you would give us a few. Will you help us with your genius?" "With pleasure," said Bastian. After breakfast, Bastian Atreyu, the Silver Sage, went out to the steps of Quercabod's palace, where Falcor was already waiting for them. A large crowd had gathered, but on this occasion it included few of the outsiders who had come for the tournament and consisted largely of Amarganthians, men, women, and children, all comely and blue-eyed and all clad in silver. Most were carrying stringed instruments, harps, lyres, guitars, or lutes, all of silver. For almost everyone there hoped to display his art in the presence of Bastian and Atreyu. Again, chairs had been put in place. Bastian sat in the middle between Quercabod and Atreyu, and Falcor stood behind them. Quercabod clapped his hands. When the crowd fell silent, he announced, "The great storyteller is going to grant our wish and make us a present of some new stories. Therefore, friends, give us your best to put him in the right mood." The Amarganthians all bowed low. Then the first stepped forward and began to recite. After him came another, and still others. All had fine, resonant voices and told their stories well. Some of their tales were exciting, others merry or sad, but it would take us too long to tell them here. In all, there were no more than 100 different stories. Then they began to repeat themselves. Those who came last could only tell what their predecessors had told before them. Bastian grew more and more agitated while waiting for his turn. His last night's wish had been fulfilled to the letter, and he could hardly bear the excitement of waiting to see whether everything else would come true as well. He kept casting glances at Atreyu, but Atreyu's face was impassive, showing no sign of what he might be thinking. At length Quercabod bade his compatriots desist and turned to Bastian with a sigh. "I told you, Bastian Balthazar Bucks, that our stock of tales was small. It's not our fault. Won't you give us a few of yours?" "I will give you all the stories I've ever told," said Bastian, "for I can always think up new ones. I told many of them to a little girl named Krista, but most I thought up only for myself. No one else has heard them, but it would take weeks and months to tell them all, and we can't stay with you that long, so I've decided to tell you a story that contains all the others in it. It's called The Story of the Library of Amarganth, and it's very short." Then, after a moment's thought, he plunged in. "In the grey dawn of time, the city of Amarganth was ruled by a silver sages named Kana. In those long past days, Moru, the Lake of Tears, hadn't been made yet, nor was Amarganth built of the special silver that withstands the waters of Moru. It was still like other cities, with houses of stone and wood, and it lay in a valley among wooden hills. Kana had a son named Kin, who was a great hunter. One day in the forest, Kin caught sight of a unicorn which had a glittering stone at the end of its horn. He killed the beast and took the stone home with him. His crime, for it is a crime to kill unicorns, brought misfortune on the city. From then on, fewer and fewer children were born to the inhabitants. If no remedy were found, the city would die out. But the unicorn couldn't be brought back to life, and no one knew what to do. Kana, the silver sages, sent a messenger to consult Eulala in the southern oracle, but the southern oracle was far away. The messenger was young when he started out, but old by the time he got back. Kana had long been dead, and her son Kin had taken her place. He too, of course, was very old, as were all the other inhabitants. There were only two children left, a boy and a girl. His name was Akhil, hers was Mukra. The messenger reported what Eulala's voice had revealed. The only way of preserving Amarganth was to make it the most beautiful city in all Fantastica. That alone would make amends for Kin's crime. But to do so, the Amarganthians would need the help of the Acaris, who are the ugliest beings in Fantastica. Because they are so ugly, they weep uninterruptedly, and for that reason they are also known as the Weepers. Their stream of tears wash the special silver deep down in the earth, and from it they make the most wonderful filigree. All the Amarganthians went looking for Acaris, but were unable to find them, for they lived deep down in the earth. At length only Akhil and Mukwa were left. They had grown up, and all the others had died. Together they managed to find the Acaris and persuade them to make Amarganth the most beautiful city in Fantastica. First, the Acaris built a small filigree palace set on a silver barge and moved it to the marketplace of the dead city. Then they made their streams of underground tears well up in the valley among the wooded hills. The bitter water filled the valley and became Moru, the lake of tears. On it the first silver palace floated, and in the palace dwelt Akhil and Mukwa. But the Acaris had granted the plea of Akhil and Mukwa on one condition, namely that they and all their descendants should devote their lives to ballad singing and storytelling. As long as they did so, the Acaris would help them, because then their ugliness would help to create beauty. So Akhil and Mukwa founded a library, the famous Library of Amarganth, in which they stored up all my stories. They began with the one you have just heard, but little by little they added all those I have ever told. And in the end, there were so many stories that their numerous descendants, who now inhabit the Silver City, will never come to the end of them. If Amarganth, the most beautiful city in Fantastica, is still in existence today, it is because the Acaris and the Amarganthians kept their promise to each other, though today the Amarganthians have quite forgotten the Acaris, and the Acaris have quite forgotten the Amarganthians. Only the name of Moru, the Lake of Tears, recalls that episode from the gray dawn of history. When Bastian had finished, Silver Sage Quercabod rose slowly from his chair. "Bastian Balthazar Bux," he said, smiling blissfully, "you have given us more than a story, and more than all the stories in the world. You have given us our own history. Now we know where Moru and the silver ships and palaces on it came from. Now we know why we have always, from the earliest times, been a people of ballad singers and storytellers. And, best of all, we know what is in that great round building in the middle of the city, which none of us since the founding of Amarganth has ever entered, because it has always been locked. It contains our greatest treasure, and we never even knew it. It contains the library of Amarganth." Bastian himself could hardly believe it. Everything in his story had become reality, or had it always been? Grogamon would probably have said both. In any event, he was eager to see all this with his own eyes. Where is this building? He asked. I will show you, said Quercabod, and turning to the crowd, he cried, Come along, all of you! Perhaps we shall be favored with more wonders. A long procession headed by the Silver Sage, Bastian, and Atreyu moved over the gangplanks, connected the silver ships with one another, and finally stopped outside a large building which rested on a circular ship and was shaped like a huge silver box. The outside walls were smooth and was shaped like a huge silver box. The out Sorry. The outside, Kimberly, you're distracting me. I don't know what you're doing right now. The outside walls were smooth without ornaments or windows. It had only one large door, and that door was locked. In the center of the smooth silver door, there was a stone set in a kind of ring. It looked like a piece of common glass. Over it, the following inscription could be read. Removed from the unicorn's horn, I lost my light. I shall keep the door locked until my light is rekindled by him who calls me by name. For him I will shine 100 years. I will guide him in the dark depths of yours, Minraud. But if he says my name a second time, from the end to the beginning, I will glow in one moment with the light of 100 years. None of us can interpret this inscription, said Quercabod. None of us knows what the words yours Minrod mean. None of us to this day has ever discovered the stone's name. But we have all tried time and again. For we can only use names that already exist in Fantastica. And since these are all names of other things, none of us has made the stone glow or opened the door. Can you find the name, Bastian Balthazar Bucks? A deep, expectant silence fell on the Amarganthians and the non-Amarganthians alike. Altazar! Cried Bastian. In that moment, the stone glowed bright and jumped straight from its setting into Bastian's hand. The door opened. A gasp of amazement arose from the 1,000 throats. Holding the glowing stone in his hand, Bastian entered the building, followed by Quercabod and Atreyu. The crowd surged in behind them. It was dark in the large circular room, and Bastian held the stone high. Though brighter than a candle, it was not enough to light the whole room, but showed only that the walls were lined with tiers upon tiers of books. Attendants appeared with lamps. In the bright light, it could be seen that the walls of books were divided into sections bearing signs such as funny stories, serious stories, exciting stories, and so on. In the center of the circular room, the floor was inlaid with an inscription so large that no one could fail to see it. Library of the Collected Works of Bastian Balthazar Bucks. Atreyu looked around in amazement. Bastian saw to his delight that his friend was overcome with admiration. Is it true, asked Atreyu, pointing at the silver shelves all around, that you made up all these stories? Yes, said Bastian, slipping Altazar into his pocket. Atreyu could only stand and gape. I just can't understand it, he said. The Amarganthians had flung themselves on the books and were leafing through them or reading to one another. Some sat down on the floor and began to learn passages by heart. News of the great event spread through the whole city like wildfire. As Bastian and Atreyu were leaving the library, they ran into Hicraon, Hisbald, and Idorn. Sir Bastian, said the red-haired Hisbald, evidently the deftest of the three, not only with the sword, but with his tongue as well. We have heard about your incomparable gifts, and humbly pray you, take us into your service, and let us accompany you on your further travels. Each one of us longs to acquire a story of his own, and Though you surely have no need of our protection, you may derive some advantage from the service of 3 such able and willing knights. Will you have us?" "Gladly," said Bastian. "Anyone would be proud of such companions." The 3 knights wished to swear fealty by Bastian's sword, but he held them back. "Seconda," he explained, "is a magic sword. No one can touch it without mortal peril, unless he is eaten, drunk, and bathed in the fire of the many-colored death." So they had to content themselves with a friendly handshake. "What has become of Hero Henrik?" Bastian asked. "He's a broken man," said Hicraeon. "Because of his lady," Hydorn added. "Perhaps you can do something to help him," said Hisbald. All 5 of them went to the inn where they had stopped on their arrival in Amerganth, and where Bastian had brought Yika to the stable. When they entered, one man was sitting there, bent over the table, his hands buried in his fair hair. The man was Henrik. Evidently he had had a change of armor in his luggage, for the outfit he was now wearing was rather simpler than the one that had been cut to pieces the day before. In response to Bastian's greeting, he merely stared. His eyes were rimmed with red. When Bastian asked leave to sit down with him, he shrugged his shoulders, nodded, and sank back in his chair. Before him, on the table, was a sheet of paper which looked as if it had been many times crumpled and smoothed out again. "Can you forgive me?" said Bastian. Hero Henrik shook his head. "It's all over for me," he said mournfully. "Here, read it." He pushed the note across the table, and Bastian read it. "I want only the best. You have failed me. Farewell." "From Princess Oglamar?" Bastian asked. Hero Henrik nodded. "Immediately after our contest she mounted her palfrey and rode off to the ferry. God only knows where she is now. I will never see her again." "Can't we overtake her?" "What for?" "Maybe she'll change her mind." Hero Henrik gave a bitter laugh. "You don't know Lamar," he said. "I trained more than 10 years to acquire my different skills. With iron discipline I avoided everything that could have impaired my physique. I fenced with the greatest fencing masters and wrestled with the greatest wrestlers until I could beat them all. I can run faster than a horse, jump higher than a deer. I am best at everything, or rather I was until yesterday. At the start, she wouldn't honor me with a glance, but little by little my accomplishments aroused her interest. I had every reason to hope, and now I see it all in vain. How can I live without hope?" "Maybe," Bastian suggested, "you should forget Princess Oglamar. There must be others you could love just as much." "No," said Hero Heinrich. "I love Princess Oglamar just because she won't be satisfied with any but the greatest." "I see," said Bastian. "That makes it difficult. What could you do? Maybe you could take up a different trade. How about singing or poetry?" Heinrich seemed rather annoyed. "No," he said flatly. "I'm a hero, and that's that. I can't change my profession, and I don't want to. I am what I am." "I see," said Bastian. All were silent for a time. The 3 knights cast sympathetic glances at Hero Heinrich. They understood his plight. Finally Hisbald cleared his throat and turned to Bastian. "Sir Bastian," he said, "I think you could help him." Bastian looked at Atreyu, but Atreyu had put on his impenetrable face. "A hero like Henrik," said Hydorn, "is really to be pitied in a world without monsters. See what I mean?" No, Bastian didn't see, not yet at any rate. "Monsters," said Hicraeon, winking at Bastian and stroking his huge moustache. "Monsters are indispensable if a hero is to be a hero." At last Bastian understood. "Listen to me, Hero Henrik," he said. When I suggested giving your heart to another lady, I was only putting your love to the test. The truth is that Princess Oglamar needs your help right now, and that no one else can save her." Hero Henrik pricked up his ears. "Is that true, Sir Bastian?" "It's true, as you will soon see. Only a few minutes ago, Princess Oglamar was seized and kidnapped." "By whom?" "By one of the most terrible monsters that have ever existed in Fantastica, the dragon Smurg. She was riding across a clearing in the woods when the monster saw her from the air, swooped down, lifted her off her palfrey's back, and carried her away." Henrik jumped up, his eyes flashed, his cheeks were aglow. He clapped his hands for joy. But then the light went out of his eyes and he sat down. "That's not possible," he said. "There are no more dragons anywhere." "You forget, Hero Henrik, that I come from far away, from much farther than you have ever been." "That's true," said Atreyu, joining in for the first time. "And this monster really carried her away?" Hero Henrik cried. Then he pressed both hands to his heart and sighed, "Oh, my adored Oglamar, how you must be suffering! But never fear, your knight is coming. He is on his way. Tell me, what must I do? Where must I go?" "Far, far from here," Bastian began, "there is a country called Morgul, or the land of the cold fire, because flames there are colder than ice. How you are to reach that country I cannot tell you. You must find out for yourself. In the center of Morgul there is a petrified forest called Woodgabe, and in the center of that petrified forest stands the leaden castle of Ragar. It is surrounded by 3 moats. The first is full of arsenic, the second of steaming nitric acid, and the third is swarming with scorpions as big as your feet. There are no bridges across them, for the lord of the leaden castle is Smurg, the winged monster. His wings are made of slimy skin, and their spread is 100 feet. When he isn't flying, he stands on his hind legs like a gigantic kangaroo. He has the body of a mangy rat and the tail of a scorpion, with a sting at the end of it. The merest touch of that sting is fatal. He has the hind legs of a giant grasshopper. His forelegs, however, which look small and shriveled, resemble the hands of a small child. But don't let them fool you. There's a deadly power in those hands. He can pull in his long neck as a snail does its feelers. There are 3 heads on it. One is large and looks like the head of a crocodile. From its mouth he can spit icy fire. But where a crocodile has its eyes, it has 2 protuberances. Yes? Yes? Okay, sorry, I got distracted. Where a crocodile has its eyes, it has 2 protuberances. These are extra heads. One resembles the head of an old man. With it he can see and hear, but he talks with the second head, which has the wrinkled face of an old woman. While listening to this description, Hero Henrik went pale. "Why, what was this monster's name?" he asked. "Smurg," Bastian repeated. "He has been wrecking his mischief for 1,000 years, because that's how old he is. It's always been a beautiful maiden that he kidnaps, and she has to keep house for him until the end of her days. When she dies, he kidnaps another. Why haven't I ever heard of this dragon?" Smurg flies incredibly far and fast. Up to now, he has always chosen other parts of Fantastica for his raids. Besides, they only happen once in every 50 years or so. Hasn't any of these maidens ever been rescued? No, that would take a very special sort of hero. These words brought the color back to Hero Henrik's cheeks, and remembering what he had learned about dragons, he asked, "Has this Smurg a vulnerable spot, Oh, said Bastian, I almost forgot. In the bottommost cellar of Rhaegar Castle, there's a lead axe. It's the only weapon Smurg can be killed with, so naturally he guards it well. You have to cut off the two smaller heads with it. How do you know all this? Asked Hero Henrik. Bastian didn't have to answer, for at that moment cries of terror were heard in the street. A dragon! A monster! Up there in the sky! Horrible! He's coming this way! Run for your lives! No, he's already got somebody! Hero Henrik rushed out into the street, and all the others followed. Up in the sky, something that looked like a giant bat was flapping its enormous wings. For a moment, as it came closer, he looked exactly as Bastian had just made him up, and in his two shriveled but oh so dangerous little arms, he was clutching a young lady who was screaming and struggling with all her might. Henrik! She screamed, Henrik, Henrik, my hero, help! And then they were gone. Henrik had already brought his black stallion from the stable and boarded one of the silver ferries that crossed to the mainland. Faster, faster, he could be heard shouting at the ferryman. I'll give you anything you ask, but hurry! Bastian looked after him and muttered, I only hope I haven't made it too hard for him. Atreyu cast a sidelong glance at Bastian. Then he said softly, Maybe we should get going too. Going where? I brought you to Fantastica, said Atreyu. I think I ought to help you find the way back to your own world. You mean to go back sooner or later, don't you? Oh, said Bastian, I hadn't thought of that. But you're right, Atreyu. Yes, of course you are. You saved Fantastica, Atreyu went on, and it seems to me you received quite a lot in return. I have a hunch you're aching to go home and make your own world well again, or is there something that keeps you here? Bastian, who had forgotten that he hadn't always been strong, handsome, and brave, replied, No, I can't think of anything. Atreyu gave his friend a thoughtful look and said, It may be a long, hard journey. Who knows? Yes, Bastian agreed. Who knows? We could start right now if you like. Then the three knights had a short, friendly argument because each claimed the privilege of giving Bastian his horse. Bastian soon settled the matter by asking them for Yika, their pack mule. Of course, they thought her unworthy of Bastian, but he insisted, and in the end they gave in. While the knights were making ready for the journey, Bastian and Atreyu went to Quercabad's palace to thank the Silver Sage for his hospitality and bid him goodbye. Falkor, the luck dragon, who was waiting for Atreyu outside the palace, was delighted to hear they were leaving. Cities just didn't appeal to him, even if they were as beautiful as Amarganth. Silver Sage Quercabad was deep in a book he had borrowed from Bastian Balthazar Buck's library. I'm sorry I can't stay longer, he said rather absently. It's not every day. I'm sorry, you can't stay longer. It's not every day that a great author like you comes to see us. But at least we have your works to console us. Whereupon they took their leave. After seating himself on Falkor's back, Atreyu asked Bastian, Didn't you want to ride Falkor? Later, said Bastian. Now Yika is waiting for me, and I've given her my word. Then we'll wait for you on the mainland, said Atreyu. The luck dragon rose into the air and was soon out of sight. When Bastian returned to the inn, the three knights were ready. They had taken the pack saddle off Yika and replaced it with a richly ornamented riding saddle. Yika didn't learn why until Bastian came over and whispered in her ear, You belong to me now, Yika. As the ferry carried them away from the Silver City, the old pack mule's cries of joy resounded over the bitter waters of Moru, the Lake of Tears. As for Hero Henrik, he actually succeeded in reaching Morgul, the land of the cold fire. He ventured into the petrified forest of Wadgabe, crossed the three moats of the Rhaegar castle, found the lead axe, and slew the dragon Smurg. Then he brought Oglamar back to her father. At that point, she would gladly have married him, but by then he didn't want her anymore. That, however, is another story and shall be told at another time. Chapter 18 is called The Acarus, and the first letter is R. And that story will be told tomorrow. Because we're already at 50 minutes, and some of these chapters are kind of long in this book, but it's all right. All right, JJ is agreeing with me. Some of the chapters are kind of long. Was that one long?
Yeah.
Was it boring?
Yeah.
It was boring?
No.
Okay, so JJ agrees with me that it wasn't boring. So I hope that you enjoyed tonight's adventure in the Neverending Story, and come back tomorrow for another great time with Bastian and Atreyu and whoever they are meeting as we read chapter 18, The Acarus. Good night. God bless.